A king dances. So does his brother. The Prime Minister joins him. In Swaziland's sacred Little Inkwala ceremony, an image of Africa, perhaps for those who live elsewhere, one of a nation not expected to compete in a globalized flat world, so far away from anywhere else with its well-preserved way of life. Yet even here, in one of Africa's smallest countries, ruled jointly by monarchy and parliament, the outside world came to do business a long time ago. And as the pressures to compete increase, the nations of Southern Africa now realize they have to look hard at how they operate in this fast-paced era of globalization.
What was the case in Africa 10, 15 years ago? Africa had a significantly larger percentage of global trade than they do today. They had 5, 6%. Today they're only about 2% for all of Africa. And it's been our remit as to what can we do to make sure that they don't fall off that wagon where globalization has worked to reduce poverty.
In Swaziland, this man, Beki Dlamini, was charged to ensure that his country doesn't fall off that wagon.
The biggest concern that investors the questions that they tend to raise relate to stability, both politically and economically in the country. They relate to security and safety of their investments in the country. They relate to issues of corruption, etc., and good governance. And then perhaps the fourth major one is really the cost of doing business.
So what these countries need to do is become globally competitive in terms of the business operating environment. Improve the business operating environment means everything from easily getting your work permits, sorting out your customs issues, getting down your transportation costs, all of these things that make it easy for companies to operate in your country.
The customer demands this type of thing. This is a quality product.
Robert Maxwell moved to Swaziland 7 years ago and today runs Procan, an apparel factory in Matsapa.
Africa has a lot of opportunity to offer. There's no two ways about it. You just got to be willing to be a groundbreaker. You've got to be fully committed in what you're doing because the cultures are totally different.
Every day, Maxwell has to face the obstacles of doing business in this part of the world. At the same time, he has to convince his retail customers in North America, like Bass Pro, that he can consistently supply them with cost-effective, world-class products, which he was able to do recently when Russell Athletic signed on with Procan to produce a line of their sportswear.
Now these have to be precise within a millimeter.
It takes Procan 8 days to train a new worker, a little longer than in other countries. But after that, Maxwell says they're just as productive and skilled as anyone else in the world.
You can see the last hour they did 105 pieces on the Scorpion line.
But outside the factory, it can be more of a struggle, with Swaziland's sometimes challenging business environment. The key to a healthy one is ease of access for investors. So the USAID Southern Africa Global Competitiveness Hub, in consultation with international experts, drew up an investor roadmap for Swaziland. Such a roadmap helps businesses navigate the legalities of setting up shop in a country and identifies where improvements could be made.
It's a question of just ensuring that information is available, procedures are transparent, and anyone that requires to use the services and to register or operate a company can actually have access to the information without any difficulty.
One of the most common obstacles on the investor roadmap is a company's ability to get work permits for its foreign nationals. This has been a frequent criticism throughout Southern Africa.
For the countries, importance is attached to ensuring that nationals get preference or priority. Obviously, the challenge of unemployment, which ranges from 35% to 40% in all countries, respectively. So that's what they are seeking to achieve, but in doing so, then they overlook the key issue of ensuring that investors, critical staff that is required to operate a business is actually granted the permission to work.
But even as the region's competitiveness improves by minimizing investor red tape, high transportation costs erode it.
Compared to your global standards of 6 to 8% of GDP, Southern Africa is sitting at around 14 to 15. So our logistics costs are extremely high.
Simply put, commercial goods here need to move faster and cheaper. If countries in the region create one-stop border posts, shippers don't need to go through customs agents on both sides. This approach helps eliminate delays at the border. It also reduces the opportunity to commit fraud by filing different declarations on each side, as well as the opportunity of contact with a corrupt official.
Lately, we are trying even to make this border post a one-stop center, whereby traffic coming into the country or going out of the country would be processed on one spot, so that we speed up the time within which we process our immigration passengers as well as all customs formalities.
Right now, Swaziland's primary commercial borders with South Africa open at 7 a.m. and close at 10 p.m. In a landlocked country, a businessman like Robert Maxwell would say that's just like being under curfew. But here, to keep the borders open 24 hours a day costs money, to pay the staff for additional shifts and to build more housing for them. It also takes long, tough negotiations with the neighborhood superpower. South Africa says it just wants to make sure it doesn't lose customs revenue or erode security with these border upgrades.
Cut the red tape, make sure that our borders are one-stop shop, but at the same time, make sure that in our borders we collect the right revenue.
We are now hoping that with this new committee that's being established, having consistent and scheduled meetings on border issues, that this is going to be resolved very soon.
The U.S. President's trade initiative through the Southern Africa Trade Hub is helping to tackle these thorny issues. On the Trans-Kalahari Corridor, customs and transport procedures between South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia have been simplified and harmonized. The new single administrative document allows shippers to pass through border posts with one document rather than the 15 or more they once needed to have. It gets goods faster to market within the South African Customs Union, the oldest in the world.
The procedures are the same, and there is mutual trust that if a container is sealed, say, container is sealed in Namibia, going to South Africa, there is no need for Botswana to open the container. All they will do is just to look at the seals and let it go.
Most of Southern Africa's containers end up here. The Port of Durban has the largest container terminal in the Southern Hemisphere, but the busy roads that lead to the port can create delays through congestion. Rail can help alleviate some of that traffic, but some countries are better equipped to take advantage of that mode than others.
The access to the ports for Lesotho by rail is heavily dependent on an efficient and effective container terminal. The situation that is currently existing at that container terminal is that the infrastructure is nowhere near being able to handle the rail-based traffic operations for exports and imports.
Compared to Lesotho, Swaziland has been blessed with an efficient rail system since 1993. Every afternoon, a train laden with 18 containers leaves the dry port in Matsapa on its 18-hour journey to Durban. Those containers are sealed at the dry port, so by the time they reach Durban, they can be put directly on the ship. Fruit processing company Swazican ships its products to market exclusively by rail.
The road has never really been an option for us. So we've retained the relationship with Swazi Rail. We are still Swazi Rail's biggest customer.
And the government-owned institution is actually turning a profit by cutting down the time it takes to get goods through Durban. But for those companies that can't plan ahead and have to satisfy the just-in-time demands of their clients in North America, road is still the only way to go.
But certainly if the railways can demonstrate a much stronger reduction in the costs of transportation in this country, then they will be given the attention. At the present moment, the train is not being used by the exporters in the textile and garments industry.
Southern Africa can do everything right to attract investors and move goods, but this can still be undermined by corruption, a region-wide affliction that is making headlines.
What corruption does is increase the cost of living, which weakens the business community or the business environment to run a business here, especially in the labor-intensive industry. If cost of living goes up, workers' wages go up, transportation goes up, everything goes up, up, up.
corruption's, it's an unfair and uneven tax. It's dispiriting. People finally give up trying to make transactions. They just say, well, this isn't a place that I want to do any business.
It's a problem that threatens business competitiveness throughout southern Africa. The Swazi government now recognizes that it has a problem and is tackling it head-on.
The issue of corruption has been raised by some investors, and it is an issue that this country is addressing. We now have a bill that's going before Parliament, establishing an anti-corruption unit that has the power to actually act.
There are many things that we could say are not perfect in this country, of course, but there's been, I think, some very positive developments in terms of advances on the rule of law over the last year, particularly with the passing of a constitution.
Despite all these economic challenges, it's HIV and AIDS that threaten the health of the region's business environment more than any other issue. Swaziland now has the highest infection rate in the world.
This country has declared HIV and AIDS a national disaster, and that puts specific priority on addressing HIV and AIDS in this country.
It's said by 2010, life expectancy here will be 27 years old, threatening to wipe out society's most productive generation. AIDS will also soon shave 20 years or more off the life expectancy in several other southern African countries.
You can't be competitive. And when your average education is falling and average life expectancy is falling at that rate, who wants to invest? Who can afford to retrain their staff? That's why I think that one of the interventions that we've tried to follow, and we need to follow even more in the future, is what can we do to increase the voice and the quality of voice of the private sector to advocate with their own governments to say, this is deadly serious.
So the private sector has begun to do something about this overwhelming problem. Companies like Botswana's Standard Chartered Bank, Mozambique International Port Services, and Swazican now provide their own HIV/AIDS programs for workers. Through strong leadership, certain countries have developed their own national strategies. Botswana has pledged to eradicate AIDS by 2016. And Lesotho's government has announced that everyone will be tested for HIV/AIDS by the end of 2007.
Not one family, not one person in this country has not been touched by HIV/AIDS. We have all buried a loved one or somebody we know, a relative. Therefore, it's about time. It's a way of life. We had no choice but to accept this is a problem that all of us have to tackle.
The mortality has actually gone up. The life expectancy has gone down to 36 right now. And in terms of the targeting of the population groups, we are very much aware that HIV/AIDS in this country has hit hard the very productive age group, and that definitely has got a negative impact on the economy.
It's really not a question of money anymore, because there are sufficient funds from the United States, other bilateral donors, UN agencies, and particularly from the Global Fund to be able to fight this. So it's really a question of being able to put these programs into place and have as effective implementation as possible.
Robert Maxwell has been fighting hard to get the government to help him treat his own workers.
We have to do something. We have to do something. Otherwise, in 3 years, there just won't be a workforce. And you cannot expect just to keep retraining people. You know, people, you give them skills, you empower people to do a certain job. It's not so easy just to replace. So if nothing is done, there's sort of a black hole looming over the entire region, not only Swaziland.
Still, despite all of Southern Africa's challenges, Maxwell's Procan is about to hire another 300 people. His contract with Russell Athletic is bearing fruit. Maxwell has just been commissioned to supply the uniforms for the Atlanta Braves, a professional baseball team in America.
BMW works in South Africa. BMW, Toyota. If BMW and Toyota can work in this region, a little garment company, I'm sure, can make it.